Nora, the actress who played little Nora, she was like, does Nora have to leave? Does she have to immigrate? She was like really upset. And I was like, oh my God. It's not a random silence. It's not like a silence just because it's cool. But it's silence because it is connected to what is going on with her. I just know that, like, for example, if any of us are walking by that street, now that corner is going to have new meaning, right?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to tell you that we had 2 screenings today in India, one in Mumbai, one in Delhi, both were houseful. And you know, I don't know if you heard the round of applause that we had for you here. Everyone absolutely loved the film.
Yay.
If I text or call my ex-girlfriend tonight, I know who I am blaming. So yeah, and that's the first question I asked everyone is like, okay, who all are thinking about the exes right now? And people are very shy, and then a bunch of people left right after that question. So you know, so anyway, welcome. And you know, we were already discussing your film. We were talking about all the questions we're going to ask you, but I would love to start right at the beginning of the film and of your idea. You know, we see these people talk at a bar, and I was reading about it, and I read that this is something that happened to you. So I would love to know how it started, how you developed the story from there on.
Yeah, I mean, I found myself sort of sitting in this bar in New York, sitting between my childhood sweetheart who only really speaks Korean and my American husband who only really speaks English. And then I think that sitting between them and translating between these two guys, I had a kind of a funny feeling that something very strange or very special is happening between us, the three of us. And then I looked up at around the bar, and I saw that there are some people in the bar who are looking at me and these two guys and trying to figure out who we were to each other. And I think that my first feeling was, I was like, well, would you like to know what a secret? You know, it was sort of it's a bit of that kind of a thing of just like, oh, wow, you really want to know, huh? And then I think my second thought was like, well, what if I actually did tell you exactly? What if I told you what it actually was going on between the three of us? Because there's no real word for it. The only thing I can do is to tell you a story. And of course, eventually there is a word for it, and the word is inyan, which I think is, which I have no doubt that there is a word for it in languages that has at all connections to like Eastern philosophy and things like that. So I assume that you guys have a word for it too, but I think to me, it's like the only way to really describe these three people is that they're inyan in this life, you know?
Yeah, how cool. And I want to, you know, we're going to talk a lot more about Inyan because I think it needs T-shirts of their own. You know, we need to put it on T-shirts. But the other thing I want to talk about is, you know, I read somewhere when you wrote the script, you put it in the maybe pile. You weren't going to make it. You just kept it on the side. So I want to know, when this thing happened at the bar, did you know in that very moment that this is a story idea you want to develop, or did that hit you later?
Well, I think in that moment, because of how special the feeling was, I thought that maybe it was, that's when I put it into a maybe pile. Once I wrote the script, it wasn't a maybe pile. Once I wrote the script, I was like, I want this, we want to make this. But before that, when it was just a story, or which honestly was just a moment that I had with these two guys, that's when I was thinking that maybe this is interesting, maybe this could be something. But part of like writing is procrastination, and also you're not sure, you know, also you're not sure if you really want to, if you believe that this is something that people want to know. And then I think that over time, it was clear to me that people did want to hear a story like this, even though there's no, it is about kind of like everyday or like mundane part of all our lives, but something extraordinary and epic happening, something very epic happening to ordinary people. So I think that it sort of was a process of like, I don't know if people will care about this movie. And then here, now the movie's done and then people do care about the movie. So I think that's really amazing.
Oh yeah, they do care about the movie. I watched it with my girlfriend last night, and she was talking about it like just before this screening, and she wanted to come again and watch it again. So it really connects in that way, right? Um, you're a writer first. You've always been a writer. This is your first debut film as a director, but how does the writing process start for you? And when you're writing something like this, what comes first? Do the themes come first? Characters come first? What kind of work do you do before you get down to writing?
I actually think that structure comes first more than anything. The structure of how the story is going to get told comes to me. And then, of course, everything else comes out of that. And in this case, I could figure out the structure because the first scene that I wrote is the first scene of the movie. And that doesn't always happen, but first scene I wrote was there. And then from there, the way that the structure works is that opening scene, the audience meets these three characters and they don't mean very much to us because we just met them. And then I think that what happens is when we come back to that scene later, the mystery of the first that was interesting, the first scene is sort of comes back. Because I think of the first scene as like an introduction to the mystery of this movie, or like welcoming the audience into the mystery of this movie. And the mystery of this movie is like who murdered who. The mystery of this movie is who are these three people to each other? So by the time that we come back to that scene again, first of all, now we hear actually what the three characters are talking about. But secondly, you're also getting to start to answer the question of who are these three people to each other because you've lived through their lives with them, with the movie.
And did you always know that you're going to span it over 20 years, 2 continents, and like somebody in the audience wanted to ask you this question, that everything seems to be connected with the number 12. Like they were 12 years old when they meet, then they meet after 12 years, then they meet after, another 12 years. Like, did that come at a structure stage? And is there an importance of that number?
Well, I think that it's more like it had to be a number that feels like it's too long. It's a really long time, but also it can move like that. Because imagine if it was like 30 years. I think 30 years might be too long, right? But like 9 is actually shorter. So it really is like finding the right balance of what's a number that makes it feel like there's weight and heaviness, but also I can snap like that and the time can pass, right? So I think it is a combination of both, but I like the number 12. I feel like because of, it always feels like it's a little bit longer than a decade, right? It's a little bit longer,
right.
But it's not a full 20 years or something,
Yeah, so it wasn't just your lucky number. It wasn't just a luck thing.
It wasn't just lucky number.
Right. And because the film is so layered and nuanced and thematically so strong, at what point in your writing do the themes become apparent to you and you start kind of infusing all these different ideas into the story?
Well, I think the themes of the story sort of is the motivator, is the motivation. So it's in the initial foundational stage of writing this story, because from the beginning, you're thinking about like, well, what's the point? Like, what's the point of making a movie? So I think it is really a step about that, where it's like, you're like, well, why is this story worth telling? Or what is the philosophy of the movie? What is the goal of the movie? I think those things all have to be in the bones of it before I can write even a page of it, right? I can't really start until I know, well, I think this is worth talking about because of this and this and this and this. And I think to me, it really did unlock for me that writing the first scene, because I think part of it is sort of being seen as an ordinary person who is living through time and space, right? And the way that time and space has weight on a person's life, and it creates something new and beautiful, but it's also destroys something old. So there is a kind of an amazing thing that I think time and space, the continent apart, or decades apart. I think that is sort of that's the combination of things that made me go like, okay, I think this story is something that I want to tell.
You spoke about time and space, and it's one of those rare films where it's so apparent the way it starts talking to you as an audience. The value of time in one's life, and how it adds up to not just your past, but your regrets, your hope, who you become, and how do you, even then, knowing all of this, how do you still stay in the present? And I think I wanted to know, when you were thinking of the structure and knowing that you're going to have to play with 2 decades, how did you start to play with the idea of time, not just in the construct of your screenplay, but also you can start to see the weight of that time in your performances? As these characters are getting older, they have more weight of the past. So I want to just ask you, how were you doing that?
So the way that it works in the performance is we're not doing very much. It's a little bit of hair, a little bit of outfit, but mainly it is in the rhythm of their performance. So the way that I was talking about it is, when they're younger adults, they're quicker to feel things. So they're quicker to be angry, quicker to be annoyed, quicker to be happy. They smile faster. They're like, it takes them no time for them to smile, right? And then when we're working on the final part of the film, where they are older, everything is slower, right? When Haesung smiles and he sees Nora for the first time in that park, for the first time in 24 years, he's not quick to smile. It's going to take him, it's going to kind of blossom like a flower, the way that he smiles, right? So I think, to me, there's a little bit of performance that I was working on with the actors to find the kind of different rhythm for different time of life in a person's life, where, you're a grown up. It takes a little bit longer for you to be upset, a little longer to be angry, a little longer to be faster. And it's just something subtle that you can really sell it. You can really make it work, and then, of course, the other part of it is like, it's also in the making of the movie, right? Because the movie really is about, that final scene of the film where she is crying. What is actually has to be implied there is that she's crying because she's saying goodbye to the little girl that she left behind. So part of when she is crying and then she's saying goodbye to the little girl that left behind, the flashback, when we go back to childhood, and then in that final ending scene, when we flashback there, the lighting of that scene is in the dark. So what that implies then is that even though 24 years have happened, the kids are still waiting in that corner. They've been waiting for 24 years to get their goodbye that they were owed, because they needed to say goodbye as children, but they were too young to say goodbye. So now they're getting to say their goodbye now in New York City, 24 years later. So sometimes it's in the actual making of the thing, like the lighting of that scene,
Yes.
It's in both.
No, that is just so beautiful. Yeah, there you go. And, we've all spoken about the ending here, even before you came on the call. And of course, I want to talk more about this idea of an ending. But before that, what you were just talking about, performances and how do you show time and the weight of time. I think it's so beautiful to know that when they are kids, they are reactive and impulsive, and they're not thinking so much about their emotions. But as they're growing older, they're also more measured. They're more, they're more measured about what they are saying, because, and I think that starts to happen when Haesung comes back into her life. And suddenly when you see her with Arthur, she's Arthur's trying to be more measured with everything he's saying, but, he's holding in a lot. It's affecting him, but he just doesn't want to say it, And so that was just beautiful. This being your first film, and you've been a writer for so long, what about this film made you feel like this is the one I'm going to direct? Because you've written so many other things. I wanted to ask you, how come you came onto deciding that this is the one you're going to direct?
I was sort of a playwright before this, so I never was writing in movies. This is the first sort of script. And I think that I was hoping that they would let me direct it right away, because and then I think that I also made a good argument for it, because the story is so personal, and I'm also bilingual, and the script is written bilingually. So in the script, it's like Korean and then English, right? It's because it has to be made in America, but at least mostly, but it has to be spoken in Korean. So I think that I kind of was a good candidate for the directing of this movie. So I think it was more like I wanted to direct it, and I was hoping that they would let me, and they let me. So it was more like that, more than like like, oh, I decided, I didn't really decide. I was like, I really
Right.
want to. And they
But
were
no,
like,
I'm so glad. I'm so glad you did. And I'm so glad the studios agreed because, it
yeah.
wouldn't have the same voice. It's such a unique,
Mhm.
specific voice. And, everyone who's seen the movie just knows that we want to see more coming from you and we can't wait. Another thing that I want to ask you, you're coming from Broadway and theater.
Mhm.
And I read somewhere about your process and chemistry read that you do with the actors before going on set. Please tell us a little bit about chemistry read and your process and the things that you borrowed from theater and the new things that you learned on set. What was that like?
Mhm. Well, I think that when it comes to chemistry, like sometimes it's just the feeling you have about the chemistry. But when it comes to, for example, the kids in the movie, the two children in the movie who play little Haesung and little Nora, in their case, I did do a chemistry read because they don't have a lot of lines, but they have to show a lot of chemistry because their connection is what makes this whole movie flow and happen, right? Because it's like the reason why they felt they were in love as children, and that really made them have this 24 years of love story. So I think it was important to do a chemistry read, and I did do a chemistry read, and I had to cast the girl first. And I had like 3 boys come in to do chemistry reads with the girl, and I asked them to ad lib, like make up a scene for themselves, the boys, to as Haesung, to convince the little Nora actress to not leave Korea and to stay with him, to be with him, to hang out, to keep playing and be friends with him. And the boy who got cast in the movie did such a beautiful performance that he made the little girl cry. He made the little Nora cry, and the little Nora, the actress who played little Nora, she was like, does Nora have to leave? Does she have to immigrate? She was like really upset, and I was like, oh my god, of course, yes, she does, but but I think in that way, I feel like finding that chemistry with them, that chemistry read was so helpful. When it comes to things that I knew from theater, and then things that I learned new in filmmaking is, well, I think in theater, story and character and dialogue and blocking and how to do a scene, I think all of those things are a part of making theater. And then, of course, but in theater, it is abstract space. The space and time is abstract, but in film, it is literal. It's real, right? So I think that transition is the only transition. And part of that, I found the hardest is in filmmaking, you are at the mercy of the weather. You're at the mercy of fire trucks going by. Like you're just at the mercy of the place that you're shooting, right? The city that you're in a way that in theater, it's a contained space that's going to be the same every day. So there are other things that are unpredictable, but still there's a contained location of it. But I think in film, it was really more like, okay, so that day that we shot the Statue of Liberty, that morning was hurricanes. So we thought maybe we won't get to go and shoot it. But then eventually the hurricane stopped. And then, of course, you see the clouds in that scene. And you're like, what a miracle, how amazing that there was a hurricane. But anyway, so I think that to me, it's the unpredictability of creating something in a literal space. I think that was the hardest for me, that I learned a lot about.
Right. And, just the vocabulary, the language of the film is so beautiful. The visual poetry that you bring with it is so unique. And it's so specific to the tone that I think you've tried to capture. And I wanted to learn that from you, which is, coming from Broadway and theater, working with the camera, finding collaborators. What were your conversations like? What were the kind of influences that you were talking about? Because, I just want to know, how did you manage to create something so specific and unique to the story?
Well, I think that what I wanted is, and I think this is because it was my first movie too, that I wanted the language of the visual language of the film to be its own, right? As in, like, the movie itself had its own language, visual language that it spoke to. So I feel like I wasn't thinking about like one movie to make the movie like, right? I didn't have a reference that was like that one movie, but I had sort of like scenes from different things or different ways that I pulled from a lot of other movies to sort of like create the language of past lives in particular. And I think a part of it is just like knowing what feels authentic to me, like, right? I think sometimes it would be like, of course, there's a really spectacular way to shoot something really pretty or like really cool or like really complicated camera movement. But every time you're like, yeah, but like, does that tell the story? You know, or does it tell the story to just have like a simple camera that is moving from here to here, right? Does it have to do all that, right? So I think some of it had to be calling my own bullshit. You know, some of it is about like asking myself that it's like, yeah, do I just want to show off? Or do I want to tell the story? So I think it's always a question that you're asking with everything that you're doing, both on set and then in the editing room, as in like, you know, like, am I going to make this decision because it's going to make me look cool? Or am I going to make the decision because it's right for the story and character? And I think every time I am trying to make that decision that way, because I am my best critic. You know, I am not the best, but the meanest critic. I'm actually the worst critic for myself. I'm somebody who's just like, I hate everything you do kind of critic. So I think that's how you can get to a place where the language of the film is so focused on telling the story as opposed to I don't know, you know, having something that's like a you know, kind of messy or like, yeah. Mhm.
And are you the kind of director who goes on set, blocks the scene, and then finds your frame? Or were you aware of the frames you wanted, and then you kind of work backwards from that?
This is such a great question. No one ever asked me this. But I think
there you go. Thanks.
I think it's exactly the right question, because I think it is connected to probably me coming from theater, because it is former. Right. I would go, and the way it works is I go on set. Sorry, this is New York City, you can hear New York City is really loud. So the way it works is I go on set, and then my actors, before they do hair or makeup, they all just come on set in their regular clothes, and we do rehearsal, just me and the actors. And then we do it again in the space that we're shooting with my cinematographer, production designer, everybody who lighting gaffer, like just everybody who works on big department heads of who makes the movie. And then they all come on set, and we do the rehearsal in front of them. And then the actors get sent away to do hair and makeup. And then at that point is when the lights get set up, camera gets set up, basically. So that is actually the order of things. So I usually almost always find a frame after. Yeah.
Right. And that's why I guess it feels actor first, performance first. And it's almost like the camera is just trying to find the reality of that moment, right? It's not trying to add to it. It's just trying to watch it, observe it, which is so beautiful. You know, I think another kind of thing that's so obvious and beautiful about the film is the use of sound and music and the score. And I wanted to ask you, are you the kind of writer who is listening to a lot of stuff and then making playlists and then sometimes playing it to your actors on set? Also, because when there's so much time that you are kind of covering in the film, does the music help you define the tone because you're shooting out of order? Or do you find the music on the edit table?
Well, I think that I think of the movie itself as a piece of music. So I think the way that movie gets put together is already as a piece of music. And then I think there are inspirations that are like, I had a playlist that my actors are listening to and things like that, but it's more about the tone. It's less about what's going to be in the movie, because the score, for example, is being created for the movie. And there's some songs in it that are a little bit more, it's diegetic. It's like, it's a part of like the bar or the part of the, you know, it's like, it's really in the world. So I wasn't really thinking in terms of knowing what soundtrack is going to go in or something like that. It was so much more about, okay, this movie has to be a piece of music as it is, and then soundtrack or the score has to be there to support the piece of music that is this movie. So I think it is like, so to me, I care so much about like the sound of the cities, for example. I was like, I really was, we sent out a second unit to go find sounds of Seoul. So just like we had a like list of sounds that we needed for the edit. And then we sent the team out to just basically find those sounds and record them. And then they become part of it, because how different, for example, New York sounds matter so much compared to what the sound of compared to the sound of Seoul, because it sounds different. And it's also, the lighting is different, everything is different, you know. So I think to me it was so much more about, it was a holistic thing. It's not something that was happening as a kind of a playlist that was on set or something. It was so much more about like the rhythm of the dialogue too, because it also has to be with like the performances too, because the human voice in a scene, that's a piece of music, you know.
I have one more question about dialogue, since you just mentioned the word dialogue, and then we'll go to the ending of the film. You know, there's so much subtext and there's so little said, and the silences speak so much. One of the things we were discussing before you came on the call was the writing process of deduction to how can we say this in less lines, or reduce the scene to like it's more efficient, or unsaid things. How are the unsaid things so powerful? Were you working backwards, or how would you write a scene? What would you define the scene in your head first and know, okay, these are the only things I want to write about?
Well, I think that I'm generally a pretty minimalist writer anyway, but more importantly, I think that the reason why silences they work in the movie is actually, I think, because of the dialogue. Because I think the dialogue is meant to be so articulating and very clarifying what the meaning of the silences is after. So for example, I think the reason why the walk to the Uber and then the 2 minutes of silence, the reason why the audience can be connected to the silence and there's meaning and there's a journey in that silence is because of the scene where they were talking a lot in the bar, right? And they were really clear about what the silence was going to be about, right? So that when we're at the silence, we all have high stakes because now we know why we have the silence. So I think, or something like in Dumbo, in the carousel, in that scene by the water, like even there, like the moments that are silent are there so that when they break the silence, they're able to talk about what the silence is about, which is that like she wants to know why he wanted to find her, right? And to me, that silence is meaningful because we're just watching her think about it, right? It's not just a random silence. Yeah, it's like it's not a random silence. It's not like a silence just because it's cool. But it's silence because it is connected to what is going on with her, right? And what's going on with him. Like, what is he thinking about, right? And they're also trying to figure out what the science is about too. So I think like all things, the thing that it is always going to be defined by the thing that it's not, right? So the silence is going to be defined by the words, right? The words are going to define what the silence is, and the silence is going to define what the words are too. So
it's so beautiful. It's almost like you're writing to arrive at the silent moment where it says something bigger. And that's so, you know, like as an audience, it's so real. You feel the silence. And you're absolutely right. It never feels like just an empty silence. You see the meaning of it. You can observe, you can literally feel it. It's very tangible in that way. And, you know, the way you kind of observe beauty in mundane, like you can see that in everything that you see in this movie, every little moment. There's beauty, but it's also just around you all the time that you kind of ignore otherwise, right? And I know from watching some of the stuff on YouTube that the last scene was obviously so important to you, and you sent out a location manager and scout for weeks to try and find a very specific location that said something or spoke to you in a certain way. Please tell us about what was it that you're looking for the last scene?
Well, it was actually, it was not something that location managers could ultimately find. It was actually something that my cinematographer could find, because it is also in the seeing of it, right? It's not just the beauty of the location, because I'm not looking for a beautiful location. That's obvious, right? I think it would be easier if I could ask my location manager to find just like a pretty thing, like something beautiful. But it had to be, so this is the contradiction. That I wanted this street to be. And this is true of both the walk home street at the end and also the corner where the two kids are saying goodbye and then they go up the stairs. Both of those scenes, my instruction was, first of all, it has to be a totally mundane, ordinary street that if you see it, you're not even going to look twice. You're just going to walk right by it. It might be a street that you might walk by every day, right? You're not supposed to care about it in a significant way. And then the second part of it had to be that it has to be the most magical, amazing, beautiful, perfect street that speaks to the whole movie. That has to feel
all directors are
amazing.
like,
yeah, like this has to be
give
both
me
of those
this,
things.
but also that.
Both of that, but yeah, but it has to be, both has to be absolutely true. Like it, because it had to be something where this ordinary street is able to be seen new, seen as a special street that is going to mean something to Nora and Arthur and Hesong, and also to us, right? So I just know that, like, for example, if any of us are walking by that street, now that corner is going to have new meaning, right? Where the garage door where they're standing in front, it's going to have new meaning, but it's not supposed to have new meaning except to you who has the story there, right? So to me, it had to be both of those things. So my cinematographer went out for weeks to find this location, and he was just there with like the lighting, with AD, with me, like he was just out there every night, because you also have to scout it at night because it has to be beautiful at night. So we did that for a long time. He did that for a long time until he found that street. And then he called me and he said, I think I found the street. And I went there. I'm like, oh my God, we found the street, you know. It was like that. And we had to do the same thing when we went to Korea, because we shot Korea second. We shot New York and then we shot Korea second. And in Korea, I also faced the same issue, which is that I was like, it needs to be something that just might be like a street that people just live on, right? That doesn't have huge, like no one's gonna go there as a tourist, right? but then of course it's going to have all this something special and beautiful and is about the whole movie too. So I think those are how I found the streets.
No, that's beautiful. Also, because it's funny, all the memories that I have, all the locations in those memories are so just mundane and they're not beautiful. And you realize that that's how memories are. It's just that in cinema, we've made them so beautiful that you forget what real memories are like. They're not that romantic. They are sometimes very mundane. So, but Celine, thank you so much for taking out the time. I'm going to open to the audiences for their questions, but this is one of the most, insightful talks I've had as a director. I feel I've learned so much from watching your movie, from talking to you. But over to the audiences here, and just anybody who has a question can just raise their hand.
So I just wanted to ask about the Arthur character. Like, was he acting dumb that he is not able to understand their language and just sitting quietly? Or like he didn't want to, let them know that he's understanding what they are communicating? Or was he actually not understanding anything?
I don't think that, like I think that Nora says at one point that it's his Korean isn't very good. I don't think that he understood, but maybe he caught some words. Maybe he caught like this word or that word, just like, like really beginning stage of a language. I think so. But I think it's like, I think Nora says that he's not very good, right? And I don't think that Nora is helping her. And of course, when Haesung meets him, he goes, it's, like, oh, your Korean's good, but it's like polite, like that's not real. His Korean pronunciation is very bad. But the actor who played Arthur, John, he asked me, he's like, maybe I'll try to get better in Korean. And I was like, no, it should be bad, because it's so much more heartbreaking that this guy's trying, right? compared to like if he's like, you're just like, come on, like how do you know Korean that well? But if you're somebody who's trying, because he sounds like a kid too, it's very bad Korean, but it's kind of, I think it's more romantic actually for him to be so bad at Korean but trying to be better. So I don't think that he heard everything. Yeah. Thank you.
Next.
Hi, Celine. Congratulations, firstly, for making such an amazing film. Congratulations. And thank you very much for making the film. It's really nice. I have one question regarding writing of Arthur's character. Like inherently in a love story, the third person is someone whom you antagonize. It's an antagonistic force. So, however, through your narrative, to those two conversations, one was the bedroom conversation which the couple have, and then later on the bar where he talks to the other guy when they're alone. So how was that process of writing Arthur and the trajectory of Arthur from this inherent antagonistic third person to this character whom we actually start to like?
Well, I think that that's the way that we have to play with expectations in the filmmaking of it, right? Because it's like a part of it is like when we meet Arthur for the first time in that artist residency, you are immediately you're not supposed to like him, right? You're supposed to be like, no, he's gonna ruin everything, right? Because we also remember seeing him in the first scene, right? So there's a bit of like, oh no, he's here. And I think that part of it is like you're watching him earn it back from the audience and from the story, that it's like, but he is capable of a great deal of love. And he's very able to very deeply love Nora, and Nora really loves him back. And I think part of it is not just that's the fight I had, which was to I'm fighting for Arthur. Like I'm fighting for Arthur to be loved as well as these two characters, even though he had a late entry, like he's in the way, and everything in the way, and he's a third person, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to be on his side for that, is to be like, no, actually, I am fighting for Arthur in the writing of the character of Arthur, because I want him to be also seen, right? Because I think that it is absolutely essential for this particular story to have Arthur who is not like a jerk, right? Who's not like mean and doesn't love Nora, right? Because I think that'd be really easy. I think life would be easy if there were like clear villains, right? But like in life, in this movie, you can't hate Arthur. You're not meant to hate Arthur, because he is also trying his best, and he is really trying to be there for them. And he tells Haesung, he's like, it's good that you came here. And he's saying that because he loves Nora so much that he knows that Nora needed this, right? And how heroic is that? And so to me, it's more about, it's about story more than anything, story and character, and how the story I wanted to be told. And I did want it to be three people being really decent to each other, being good to each other in this movie. And I was always hoping that that's the thing that is at the end of it. It's like, where there are three people that are being good and trying to be adults. And there might be drama in that too,
But in just a follow-up question to that, did you always have the end in mind, that this is where you want to end? Like when you started writing?
Yes. I can't write anything until I know how it ends. I need to know how it ends before me to write it, If I don't know how it ends, I usually can't start. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think there's one last question. Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Hi, Celine. Loved your film. One question. Since so much of it that these actors are doing is also about what they're thinking inside, and they're not really saying that out loud, how were your notes like when you were directing them? And how did it change from, say, like take to take when you didn't quite get what you wanted?
Well, I feel like when it comes to, if so much of it is just a collaboration, but they're also doing something that is so difficult, which is to be in front of a camera, which like, I don't want to do that, like I don't want to be on camera, but they're professionally on camera. So I think some of it is like they're not only being seen, but their emotions have to be seen. And I don't have fireworks or CGI to help them have emotions, right? So there's some things that I did to help them, which is like, of course, some of it is just simple, like you just give them notes. You just give them notes in between takes and being like, okay, I think it's a little bit like this, right? Whatever it is. I know you're saying this, but you're secretly meaning this, or like whatever that is. And then it's just a normal kind of giving direction. But something else I did was just that I kept the actors apart. I've kept the character of Haesung and character of Arthur, the actors, apart until that moment when they see each other for the first time. And we were rolling when they did that for the first time. So their expression of surprise and their expression of shock and awe, I think all of that is authentic because the actors had met each other for the first time in that scene, right? And similarly, the moment where Haesung and Nora hug each other for the first time in 24 years, the first time that they see each other at the park and they hug each other, that was the first day, that's not the first take, but that was the first day that the actors got to touch each other. I didn't let them touch. So it was the first time that the idea of each other became physical. So, and then, for example, and you can see it in the way that they hug, right? So I think some of it is more like doing those little things to help the actors access something, because it is of course hard. I find acting to be a very hard thing. So it's just collaboration,
Thank you so much, Celine. This was wonderful having you. Thanks for taking on the time. We had a great time watching your movie. It releases on 7th of July, and we are all going to be really rooting for this one. So yeah,
go see
congratulations
the movie.
again.
Tell your friends.
Yes, all of us will be at the theaters again for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for coming down.